AskReddit by the Gay Potato 7. What's the creepiest thing you've ever experienced that you still can't explain? Camped at Polarhale State Park on Kauai. After being trapped on the beach during a 5-hour torrential rainstorm, my wife and I tried dozing off. At this point it was 1 AM. The second our heads hit the pillow we felt footsteps around our tent. Whatever it was, and we could tell it was multiple beings, human, animal, whatever, was circling our tent, making animal noises, and flashing lights all around and into our tent. We didn't want to engage. We felt their intentions were very bad. Long story short, they harassed us literally all night long until the sun came up. Every single time we made any sort of noise or shifted in our tent, the noises would get louder and more aggressive. Everything inside the tent was drenched from the storm. We didn't get a single minute of sleep all night. It was the worst night of our lives. We literally thought we were going to die. Once we got home, we check out the podcast Ghost Lore of Hawaii, all about scary stories from Hawaii. The host is a top-notch storyteller. You may want to share your experience with him. Edit, a word or two. Me and my brother were hanging out in our garage when all of a sudden we heard a similar sounding voice come from the front yard, repeating exactly what my brother had just said, only in a mocking sort of tone. From the distance the voice came from, the garage is in the backyard and fenced off. There's no way anyone could have heard what he was saying. It still freaks us out. Bird maybe. I was playing video games in my room as a kid and heard someone gently knock on my door and open it. Thinking it was my parents, I called out to whoever it was, and then my door gently shut itself. My parents were out to dinner that night, so it was only me in the house. I know for a fact someone opened my door, but I have no idea who. This happened to a girl I knew in high school. Alone at home at night, in her room watching videos, when her door opened slightly. Difference is, she saw a guy and started screaming. The guy bolted out of the house. My friend and I were sitting in the living room in the dark in our rental house. Suddenly from the far back of the house we hear what sounds like someone changing the dial on an old-fashioned radio. Like FDR fireside chat era radio. We heard an old-timey woman speaking, indistinguishable words, dial changing sound, and then creepy music like at the end of The Shining, then dial changing sound, then nothing. It lasted at most 5 seconds. No one else was home. We couldn't think of any electronics in the back of the house that would have accidentally gone off. I'm sure there's an explanation, but it was still creepy as fuck. Oh god. I'm so glad I'm reading these in the morning, rather than when I'm about to go to bed. That's fucking terrifying. I lost an entire day. I went to bed Friday night and woke up Sunday morning. It was like I didn't even exist that entire day. Nothing in my apartment was disturbed. There was no activity on my phone. Absolutely nothing. There was no evidence I was even there. Freaked me out pretty good. You may want to get a carbon monoxide detector if you don't already have one. Just to be on the safe side to rule that out. Last year I was in the hospital and saw a tray of food suddenly fly across the room and crash into the bathroom door. I wasn't alone when this happened. There were 2 hospital employees in the room and my sister was visiting. We were all a little freaked out. A little freaked out? I would have taken a hell no Uber out of there. No thank you. I saw a shadow figure in my kitchen when I was 6. My father's aunt turned off the lights to my grandma's flat after a party and I could see her outline in the kitchen. I asked her why she was staring at me the following day and her response was that she went straight home. I recently read that shadow people are likely results of our brain's ability to interpret the space around it misfiring. Like it expects or places a person in a spot when there isn't one, so a human-shaped void is the result. I used to work at a psychiatric hospital that used to be an old tuberculosis hospital back in the day. I used to date a coworker and since we live far apart, we would sit in our cars and just talk after work. One night it was cold and drizzling outside and I was reclining in seat looking up through the sunroof. just staring at the rain. Slowly but steadily a handprint on the sunroof started to show. I assumed it was always there in the oil from my hands that was never wiped or something. But when I put my hand next to it, the handprint was child-sized and it was from inside the car. I don't have kids and no child has ever been in my car. Just as it appeared it slowly faded away. That's just one of the things I couldn't explain. One other time I saw a doppelganger of my coworker in broad daylight sitting at her desk, and when I started talking to her she just disappeared, and at the same time. WTF. There are several things, but the one that I seriously cannot explain away, no matter how hard I try, happened when I was about 17 living in my childhood home, which is where I experienced a lot of weird stuff. It was after midnight and I was going up the steps to go to my room when I felt a hand grab my right shoulder really hard and yank me when I was on the second step from the top. Had I not been holding on to the banister, I would have fallen down the steps. It pulled me so hard that I twisted and slammed my knee into the stair. I ran the rest of the way to my room and sat in bed for the next like half an hour, feeling my shoulder burn. I finally found the courage to look at it, and there was a red handprint on my shoulder and scratches that looked like nails had dug into my skin. Everyone else in the house was asleep. At that point, we had a dog that was asleep in my room, and a bunny who was in her cage. That was the most terrifying, unexplainable thing that ever happened to me in that horrible house. Did you show your parents? Seeing with my then girlfriend what appeared to be a ghost. A woman in older clothing with black circles around her eyes who looked up at us, on the side of a country road in broad daylight. Edit. When we looked back and later turned the car around, she was gone. Did your GF see it too? I was in high school at the time. I lived in a house with a large pond behind it, and one morning I just woke up. It was right before sunrise. I just felt like something was off. I walked into the kitchen and glanced out towards the pond and I saw something white. I focused in on what I was seeing and I realized it was a woman in a white dress walking around the pond. I have a large family, so I thought it was somebody in my family or a friend. I walked out of the house, and as I approached the woman she stopped walking and just stood there looking out over the water with her back facing me. I walked right up to her and reached out to touch her, but as I did she vanished. I was and still am extremely confused about this. That happened over 12 years ago, but still to this day when I'm outside and I see water, a mirror, a window or anything that reflects light, sometimes I see a woman's face. Capital I. Oh hell no. Middle of the sea outside China on an oil rig, working night shift on the drill floor. It was only me and one other colleague. Suddenly I saw something in the corner of my eye, thought I was just tired. But then it happened again. Decided to go out from the driller's cabin and look around, and there are small birds dropping out of the air every few minutes, all around the drill floor. Some are alive, some are dead. They do not get back up. Was the drilling releasing some kind of methane or other gas that may have risen up and killed them? I fly a lot for work. One time, about an hour and a half from the coast, we saw this big bright light in the sky just moving up and down. Others saw it zigzag across the sky, all in directions and speeds that shouldn't be possible. Best guess is something military, as there is an Air Force base nearby, but still, the speeds were just, it's impossible. A friend of ours used to be a B-52 pilot and would see those at super high altitudes. He had no explanation. My mom told me this story. When I was about 3, we had just built our new house. This was 2005 BTW. At the time, one of my cousins was in a ton of trouble with drugs and the Mexican mafia supposedly. It was said that he was running drugs to the border since he was a truck driver. At a Christmas party at the end of 2004, my cousin was asked by my mom if he would like to come help my dad finish building the house to make some extra money and get away from his issues. He gladly accepted. Well, he committed suicide that night after the party. Took about 3 days to find him. Months later, My mom and I are in the living room of our house and she states that I looked out the window to our backyard and began laughing and making faces. My mom asked what was so funny and I told her there was a funny man outside the window making faces. Obviously she didn't see anyone, so she asked me to describe the man. I described my dead cousin almost perfectly. I don't really believe in ghosts, but I still don't understand this one. When I was around 8 or 9 years old, I was awoken in the middle of the night by the feeling of someone grabbing me by the ear and pulling me upright into a sitting position. It felt like my ear was burning from the touch. No one was around. The moonlight through the window made it bright enough that I would have seen someone. It was super freaking painful and I remember crying and being too scared to go to my mom's room to wake her. Had a red scab in my ear the next day. My sister reckoned a ghost thought I was their misbehaving kid or something. Spider bite? Not exactly creepy, but really confusing. One time, on my birthday in late March, when I was turning 9, me and my family went to a restaurant called Montana's, and a magician came for my birthday. First he said hello, my name here, and I said hello back. The weird thing about this is that my parents swore on everything they didn't tell him my name, which was pretty weird. Then, he showed us a killer trick. He told me if he messed up the magic trick, I would get the keys to his van. So I agreed. He told me to draw anything I wanted on the card, and then put it in a tiny plastic case and leave it in my pocket. He then told me to pick a random card. I pick one, and he shows me the card. It was the exact same card I drew that was in my pocket. Out of shock, I checked my pocket to see if the card was still there. And all I found was the empty plastic case. So I didn't end up keeping that. Same happened to me. I wrote on a certain card, like 4 of hearts or something of the sort, and put it in a box. The box was never moved or touched, and then he told me to look up and my card with my name in my handwriting was somehow glued to the ceiling. Go to open the box, my card was gone. This was when I was like 12. I think about it every now and then and wonder how the fuck this magician did that. Sleep paralysis nearly every night when I was a teenager. I had this a few times, mostly as a kid. It's terrifying. I was playing in my room as a kid and I looked up and saw a tissue coming up out of the tissue box by itself. I bolted out of my room and was so scared I could hardly tell my mom what happened. But it never happened again, so whatever it was, it must have felt bad that it scared the shit out of a small child and never came back, or got over its cold. My freshman year of college, I woke up at 5 AM and could swear a guy was kneeling on top of me, trying to choke me. In a panic, I sprang out of bed, only to find him gone. I checked under the furniture and in the closets, but he wasn't there, either. The door was locked. I did not have a roommate, even though it was a 2-person dorm, so I know it wasn't some random roommate prank. I never figured out who or what it was. Sleep paralysis, look it up. A common theme is a dark figure pressing on your chest. Weird animal corpses on the golf course between holes. Looked like dead fetuses or something. Of what animals? I was sitting in a car as a teen waiting for my parents to finish talking. I saw this bald tall man in an orange jumper walking quickly with his eyes locked on a group of boys and he had something in his hand. As he got closer to them I noticed it was an axe. He lifted his arm as to swing it as he got closer to the group, then a car passed in front. By the time the car moved no man was there and the group of boys were still standing there talking like nothing happened. I was wide awake, sober, and can still remember him clear as day. No idea what that was about. Had a dream that I would lose my brother. When asked if he would die I said no but couldn't explain or know how could lose him if he didn't die but would lose him. I cried and was so upset. BC dream was so real. My bro has paranoid schizophrenia now. I knew it years ago in my dream. Also dreamed would lose my mom and grandmother in a dream when was a kid. It was true. One more dream after grandma passed. We were hanging out under a tree on a hill and my dad opened my door and woke me up. Told him close my door BC wanted to get back to my dream and he just stood there. Didn't know till years later he saw my grandmother silhouette laying next to me and she told him in telepathy she wanted to lay by me one more time. Dreams are real. As weird as it sounds, dreaming of birds have forecast deaths pretty reliably for me. It's usually within 2-3 weeks of my dream, and it's not random strangers, celebrities, but people either close to me or my family in some way. Note that I am a massive skeptic when it comes to anything psychic adjacent. I don't believe in God or an afterlife. It isn't a I want to believe scenario. It makes no sense to me logically. I mean, it's technically explainable if you believe in ghosts, but the day my dad died I was listening to a conversation from the top of the stairs and I look into my mum's room to my right. IDKY, but I felt like I had to, and for a second I see a corner of my mum's quilt just in the air, and as soon as I see it, it just drops. Now that is weird on its own, but something that's also weird is that the side of the bed this happened on was the exact same side of the bed he used to sleep on. I've had people say it was wind, but that quilt is too heavy to be moved by wind. I've had people say I imagined it was floating, but I literally saw the corner in the air and just drop like a Looney Tunes character fall off the side of a cliff. Best explanation I can come up with was ghost, but even then I'm skeptical. It was like maybe I did imagine it, but still doesn't explain that it still moved. Nothing super creepy has ever happened to me, but I once heard this story from a guy who said he was staying over at someone else's house and he was all by himself there with no one else home. He said he went outside in the middle of the night and all the lights in the house were switched off, but when he got outside he noticed one of the lights was switched on, but when he came back inside and went into that exact room he saw it switched on. It was switched off again. It wasn't a problem with the power because the light came on again when he flicked the light switch. And then he said he just went back to bed as if nothing scary happened. In the 80s, my family and I were staying at a cabin on a big lake in Idaho. I was probably around 7 or so, and my uncle's friend locked his keys in his car. It was dark out and I remember being with my dad and uncles as they were trying to jimmy the lock. All of a sudden someone in the group said, "What's that?" I looked up and saw what looked like a very bright star, stood out from all the other stars on a very clear night. It was zipping around the sky. It moved from one point to another very quickly and then full stop and then on to the next point. From my vantage point it looked like it was star hopping, traversing vast distances in just a blink of a second and then full stop. After a minute or so, all of a sudden it zipped off into the vastness of space. Don't know what it was and I never experienced anything like it since, but I'll never forget it. What lake? I have a friend that had a light chase them on the highway around Anderson Lake.